Hey guys, this is Red Baron FPV, and well, I got this new frame in and I finally had a chance to do a little review video about this frame. It is the new Diatone ET 150mm frame, and I got it actually last week and just now having a chance to show you guys. So I'm going to pull it out and show you everything that it comes with. Comes in this wrap, similar to the other Diatone frames, and it's just one bag. Has some warnings on here, such as this one. Warning, please do make sure that you have used the red insulation spacer, one piece or two pieces between the power distribution board and the carbon fiber board to prevent short circuit. And that's the reason, because carbon fiber is conductive. So if you have the power distribution board and power, positive and negative, hitting the carbon fiber, it will short out everything. On the back, you can see just through the bag. So anyway, let's open this up and take a look. All right. So let's just pour out everything here and show you what's in the bag. All right, we'll just set that off to the side. And again, you get a picture on the card, the ET Series 150, looks like 26mm height, 26 grams in weight without electronics, and 150mm width. So I have actually started building one, and overall I'm very impressed with this this frame. It's a pretty nice frame. You know, for the most part, it's probably pretty much an atom, you know, made by Rotor X, but I'm sure it's significantly cheaper. One thing that I did notice on this frame, you know, other than it being a unibody, all one piece, no extra screws for the arms, is the impressive tooling they have here to recess this area. And I don't know if that's just to try to reduce the conductivity or to just make everything fit a little better. But I was quite impressed. I've never seen this done on a carbon fiber frame before, so I just wanted to point that out. But anyway, let's pull everything out and see what's in the bag. So here is the main frame, and of course this is the top plate. Oh, and while I've got these out, let's go ahead and measure these. Let's see, let me zero this out. All right, let's see how thick that is. All right, so this is, looks like 2.27mm, 26. And let's just see for consistency, 2.15. So basically it's a 2mm carbon fiber, and the top plate is much thinner. It's almost exactly 1mm. So, so the main top plate is 1mm, and the main frame is close to 2mm. It's just a little off, but it is a 2mm main frame. All right, so I'm going to set this over here. Here's the top plate. The next thing you get is the new power distribution board. And this power distribution board is something new that they've started including with the Diatone frames. Let me go ahead and cut it open. So it has a separator around the outside, so if you have a bigger plate to mount this to, you have that option. Though on this frame, it fits the inner holes and not the outer holes. So you will need to snip off this material and just use the inner board. Talking about this board a little bit, if you notice, there are a few different leads. There are 12 volt or whatever volt your main power supply for the quad is. That will feed to these, and basically the sides and the corners of both sides. This will feed whatever power you're feeding into this board back out to your speed controllers or whatever you know, peripheral devices you've got on the quad. These have a power step down to 5 volts, and it's actually separated, so you've got 5 volts, and I'm not sure how good the regulators are, but it's sending 5 volts out to, say, your camera, your your video transmitter, your flight controller, which a lot of the speed controllers like the DYS speed controllers don't have BECs built in. So you'll need to run 5 volts to the flight controller, which in turn will power your receiver, which is also 5 volts. So I'm going to just set this here. Let's see what else is in the bag. So it looks like you've got some nuts. These are the bolts for the flight controller and the bottom of the power distribution board. These are the bottom bolts for the power distribution board and the flight controller. The aluminum standoffs. The screws for the top and the bottom plate between the standoffs. Okay. And don't eat this. Then you get 2 bags of these red insulators. And now again, as it said on the very beginning on the bag, is make sure and use these, because what happens is when you have the power distribution board, say, affixed to here, this is charged and it could potentially short to your carbon. So you want to make sure and put those insulators there to make sure that you don't conduct and it doesn't short or fry your system. You don't want the magic smoke. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll get started building this thing. All right, so let's go ahead, and the first thing I like to do is go ahead and get this power distribution board settled. So again, you've got the outer rings with outer holes. If you have a bigger quad you're going to use this on, I imagine they're using the same power distribution board for their other products like their 180 or their 250 millimeter frames, but for this one you only need the inner one. So all you do is just take a pair of wire cutters and just carefully snip that off, and you can separate them. And it may take some chiseling to do, but just be careful, and you can snip this off. Kind of like your cameras, you know how the cameras come, the FPV cameras, they have an outer board and an inner board, and a lot of times it only fits the inner board, but they give you the option, which is actually pretty nice. It's pretty nice they include that so that you have that option. All right, so I've snipped them all, and this is now useless. So one thing I like to do is I like to clean up these edges, just less things to snag, because you can see there's some burrs here. So what I do is I just take very carefully an X-Acto blade, and I just kind of skim it off, and it cleans up the edge quite nicely. All right, pretty easy to do. You can even take a little bit of sandpaper, but you know, I'm not that picky, so that's pretty good. So let's go ahead and put this on the frame. And what we're going to need is, of course, the bottom plate. We're going to need some of these red spacers, the insulating spacers, and again, like it says on the outside of the package, it says you can use 1 or 2, and what they mean is you can stack them too high, or you can just use a single. However, I did learn that 2 is just a little too tall, and I'm not having any conductivity issues by just using 1 thick. So I'm currently just using 1. The next thing you want to get out are these 2 things, which is basically your screws and your standoffs. These are standoffs because they're a little fatter, and those are your bottom screws. So let's go ahead and open those so I can show you. Pour these out. And one thing I think is pretty cool, I mean, it's not a lot, but they give you an extra of both. So you get an extra standoff and an extra screw because you're likely to lose them. So what I do is I actually just go ahead and take this screw here and stick it through the bottom of the quad like that. And we'll go ahead and stick all 4 in. Now this is a little bit challenging to do. You may want to just do 1 at a time. I'm impatient, so I just do all 4. And then the trick is to get it to flip over carefully. And again, It's not going so well. Let's just go with one at a time. I promise I've done it before, but it's not worth it. So anyway, let's stick one in the bottom. And you can tell the recessed area, it should be the inside of the quad or the top. Then an insulator. Then a standoff. And if you notice, these are female to male standoffs, so you just screw this on. You can just hand screw it, that's enough. You may want to Loctite a little bit, but honestly, with the nylon, unlike metal, they actually kind of grab each other, so I don't think Loctite is necessarily important here. You definitely want to make sure they're secure because you don't want them coming loose, but honestly, with your hands, you don't want to over tighten them anyway. With my hands, I can make them very, very secure just by tightening that way, but just don't overdo it because nylon threads will shred, and then, you know, you've got one extra. So you may learn once, but don't do it twice unless you order some extra parts, which fortunately I wanted to mention that Banggood is now offering parts for these, which is pretty awesome because parts were really difficult to get. You would basically have to order an entirely new frame, and you know, what if you just need one thing? So I think it's pretty great that they're starting to offer that. So as you can see, I'm just sticking these together, put an insulator here, and then my standoff. Oops, you know what? I did something wrong. Oh my goodness. Well, see, I get ahead of the game. Now, if you weren't going to use the power distribution board, you would just go forward that way. However, we are using the power distribution board, so I forgot to put this on. So anyway, let me just mention, you can do it a couple different ways. If you want your 5 volt to the left or forward, that's up to you and what orientation works best for your wiring plan. However, for me, I think the 5 volt on the front and the back works best because it's going towards the camera and towards the video transmitter, as well as easy access for the receiver and over to the flight controller. So that works pretty well. So you can put another insulator between here and here, but if you see, look how thin that thread is. It's not very long. I mean, you would have to get some longer screws to make that work. So all you do is just put the standoff above the power distribution board, and like so. Okay, now I got it right. I was getting ahead of myself. So, as you can see, we've got the screws going in through the carbon, the insulator, the power distribution board, and then the standoff. Now here, you would actually set your flight controller, and of course I didn't bring one here, but you would just slide your flight controller on the top, and what's pretty cool is it basically would stack the flight controller on top of this power distribution board. Then, after the flight controller, you just take these nuts, and again, you get one extra, which is pretty nice. So you would place your flight controller here, and then just hand screw these on top. And I'll do that in a minute. I'll go grab a flight controller and just show you so you can see. So I'm just gonna hand screw these on loosely, just so you can see. All right. All right, so now we've got that, and you can see the gap there. That's where the flight controller would go, in this gap right here. And then, of course, you would tighten this down as well as you could just to secure the flight controller. Of course, you would want to do all of your wiring before you put the flight controller on, obviously. When you get ready to do your wiring for here, you want to tin each of the pads. And what I mean by tinning is just, you know, putting some solder on each pad so that there's a nice pillow of solder on each one, so that when you attach your wire, you can just literally just heat it up, and then it's going to blend it right into that soldering pad, which would make a big difference and make it a lot easier for you. All right, so let's go ahead and put together the rest of the frame. So we're going to grab the standoffs here. Let me open those up. And move this out of the way. All right, so the other thing we need are these screws. Pour those out. All right, so as you can see, there are 2, 4, 6 screw locations. Now, I did see earlier today, there's a user on our Facebook group that had a really good idea. He actually got a little bit longer screw, I believe, and he actually made a standoff with more of these nuts. And actually, he may have not even gotten a longer screw. But what he did, he may have had extra nuts, but what he did is he actually raised the cross-section a little bit higher, which is actually pretty cool. So if you need a little bit more space, that was a really good idea. Just saw that today. But we're gonna do this just like the manufacturer, like Diatone intended. So you'll wanna put a little bit of Loctite, red or blue. The red is a little tougher than the blue. Put a dab and just a dab onto the screw. And then honestly, you can just, at this point, you can just hand tighten those on. So just go around the entire quad and put those on. Almost there. Now I am pretty impressed with this frame. It's a well-made frame. It looks super nice. You know, it may not be Diatone's original design, but I'm pretty happy with it. For 20 bucks, it's a pretty darn nice frame. It is real carbon fiber. It's not like the early Diatone 150 that was actually glass fiber, fiberglass. This is a true carbon fiber frame. Looks like one of these screws is a little messed up. It's not going on. Let's just do a new screw. I can't wait to see it flying. I have one very close. I've got some tuning to do and a little bit more programming on my arming switch, and probably a little bit of more setup on my ESCs. Now, on the one I'm building, I'm doing a 1306 motor. I'm using RCX motors from my RC Mart. That's who it is, my RC Mart. And but the DYS 1306s are probably the same exact motor. I'm also using the DYS SN20 speed controllers, which have no BEC. So you'll just run your signal and your ground to the flight controller. That means you'll have to run 5-volt power to the flight controller on just one of your open channels just to provide power to the flight controller. Now, the way the flight controller connects to your receiver, that you're going to have one wire that'll have positive and negative. So the flight controller, once it's there, it's powered from this power distribution board, will ultimately power your receiver for flight control. So anyway, I've got those 6 standoffs on. Move it so you can see. And then simply put the top on it. So just align the holes best you can. Actually, let me get one started. Might be a lot easier. Tell you what, let me go grab that flight controller, and I'm gonna put that on before I put this top on so I can show you. I'll be right back. All right, guys, I went and grabbed an old flight controller just to give you for an example. So anyway, let me just get this out. Now, one thing I wanted to mention on these micro quads, plugs, I mean, they're great for pluggability, but honestly, even though it's kind of a pain, I actually hard solder all of my wires directly to the speed controller or the flight controller. As you can see, these pins were for signal and ground. It is kind of a pain, and I also solder all of my receiver connections here. The other thing I also do is I take a pizza buzzer and I actually I solder it on there without any wire just to keep the weight down. But also, this is a critical part because these are tiny frames, and it'd be very easy to lose these in the grass. So pizza buzzer, best money you could spend. absolutely make sure you put them on there, because you know, you can do the tracker tags, but space wise and weight wise, this is better money spent for sure. So anyway, the other thing I also do on my builds is, you know, the orientation per the naze. This is a naze board. The orientation, this should be forward. However, I don't like having my USB plug in the back, because let's say you've got wires here. It'd be difficult to get in here. Plus, you've got the other wires shooting out the front if you use the pins. So what I do is I turn it 90 degrees either left or right, and I just prefer putting it left. Now for this in naze, you'll need to, like in clean flight, you'll need to change your orientation, yaw orientation, to 270 degrees. In other words, 270 degrees this way. If you turn it the other way, opposite this arrow, you would set it in clean flight. And it's actually, you can do it in two places. You can do it in CLI, but on the first page of configuration, you can actually set your orientation there. So anyway, as you can see, it fits nicely above the power distribution board, so it gives you enough room for plugs underneath. And so anyway, you just attach that. Let's assume all your wiring's on, and just tighten those nuts back on to the flight controller. And we'll do that really quick. All right, so then lastly, we'll go ahead and put the top plate on there. So what you do is just take this, line it up best you can. You might want to just take a screwdriver and a little bit of Loctite once you're on the final build to build this quad, and go ahead and secure these into the standoffs. Pretty straightforward from here. At least as far as the frame is concerned. And I really hope this helps people, because, you know, I mean, for the most part, it's a straightforward build. It's not super complex, but, you know, I really like to help people that maybe have never built one or bought one. Maybe they're considering buying this frame, and perhaps this might give them some insight into things they are unaware or not able to find on the Banggood website, because sometimes, you know, it's hard to tell, you know, certain features or characteristics of a quad just from a shopping cart. So, you know, that's the reason why I make these videos, just to really help people out and, you know, give some information. Somebody may not realize that that's the reason for their standoffs. So anyway, all right, we've almost got this together. 2 more screws to go. And then once you get all the screws in there, you'll just want to go around all of your screws and tighten them down, both on the top and the bottom of the quad. That way you've got a nice, solid, secure fit. And another thing I do is I don't fully tighten them down until all of them are each in a standoff, because you might have a little bit of skew. And if you fully tighten down one before you tighten the other ones, or even get the other ones in, the holes may not align, which could be a problem. And then you know, if you have Loctite on it, you're undoing it again. So what I'll do is I'll go around the bottom here and just give it a little extra little turn. You just want to take it to where 2 fingers tightens it. You don't want to over tighten it. It doesn't take a lot, just a little. So that's it. There's a completed ET Diatone frame, and as you can see, these are all of the spare parts that were left, which is pretty awesome, as well an additional bag of insulation spacers, and quite a few screws, because you probably will lose some screws in this build. A couple features I wanted to mention on this quad. Number one, you've got a position here for the camera. This would be for your FPV camera. And what's kind of neat about the design is a lot of people like their cameras at an angle. And with that being the case, and you do a standard size, say 600, 700 TVL camera, your lens would not allow to tip up at all without, because the top plate would be in the way. So this is actually pretty smart. So it allows you to tip up your camera at an angle, and it actually can leave outside of the top of this plate through this hole. The other thing I noticed are these 4 holes here. Now, these 4 holes could be used for maybe like if you did a double plate, like maybe you wanted to add a power distribution above it and then another top plate or something like that. I actually use these holes for my receiver antennas to come out of each of these holes, which is pretty nice. So you could do it out of the front or the back. 2 holes, I use the front and I actually have my receiver above this flight controller jammed in there. And again, I solder all of my connections. The other thing I've noticed is on the top plate, there's 2 holes here, and that would be for Velcro for your battery. It's designed for the battery to go on the top plate. However, I'm not completely sold on that concept. You know, I've started stripping down a Mobius, and I like to have some HD footage, and this thing on a 1306 motor could certainly handle a stripped down 23 gram Mobius, so you get some 1080p footage and not just DVR footage. So the problem with the battery here is there's no way to get a Mobius. So I've been kind of thinking about maybe, I don't know, coming up with a plate to go on here for some Velcro straps, so maybe I can put the battery on the bottom. I need to fly it and really see, you know, what kind of difference in performance it has from having the battery on top versus on the bottom. Though I would like to get the Mobius on here somehow, and there's just not enough room inside here for a Mobius to go, or much less on top of the battery. The other one thing I wanted to mention is if you notice this little hole right here, and that hole is for your transmitter's antenna to stick through this hole. One thing I experienced on my antenna, because it's a little bit fatter SMA wire that I'm using, is that gap was a little too small. So I actually ended up just taking some wire cutters, and I just kind of snipped carefully the ends of those off just to make it a little bit fatter. I even took the X-Acto blade and kind of scraped it a little bit, and I was able to make this just wide enough so that there's not contact, but I was able to slip in the SMA connector or SMA wire for my antenna into that hole. Matter of fact, here's the one I'm working on right now. It's very close to finish. I even put a little hot glue here just to ensure that, you know, it holds nicely in that hole. But as you can see, it is a very tight fit in there. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the propellers, these are cut 40-45 props. I built the last 150 Diatone, and the thing about those is the standoffs were so close. I was able to get the props as long as I could possibly make it, where there's just enough clearance on the standoffs, but it was just a hair over 3 inches. On this one, this frame, there's a lot more separation between, and that's because of the shape. I was actually able to keep more prop on this one. So I've actually cut these a little bit longer than on the other Diatone 150. So that was a plus, because more prop equals more thrust, even with the same power setup and everything. There's a million ways you can make your connector. For now, I'm just running it up through the top. You could make it come out the back, but the one thing they always say is don't ever let your power wires touch your antenna, or your signal will start to degrade. I'm using a micro camera on this build for now, which is a great little cheap camera. It works fantastic, has sound, and it's a 600 TVL, so it's a little small in that big space, but I was actually thinking about trying to cram in just the lens for a 1080p camera above it and maybe put the guts somehow inside, but I'm still trying to figure that part out myself. As I mentioned, I'm currently running this with the battery on top. I'm just using the super light Velcro. There's no connector or clasp or anything. It's just that I got it from Walmart, and it's just an assorted pack of Velcro. They come in multiple colors. I just went with black. So anyway, I hope this has been a helpful video for you guys, and very soon we'll have some flying and let you see how this thing performs in the sky. Anyway, thanks a lot, and have a great day. Bye.